fact that
I
the
like
biggest ones can weigh
turtles.
203.
Evolution, baby.
Evolution is a bitch named Emily. That's it. That's the whole intro. Don't get me wrong, the
Emily,
concept
what?
of evolution is
Who
pretty
hurt
cool.
you, bro?
It's the reason giraffes get to flex their high in the entire
Why is your
animal
name gotta
kingdom.
be Emily?
But there are just times where nature and evolution decide to team up and absolutely hoe an animal's entire existence. So here are 10 animals that I personally think got done the dirtiest. It's not exactly in order, but obviously some animals are going to get
this
violated
makes
more
sense.
flagrantly than others. And I say that because if this
That
list
one
were
makes
actually in
sense.
order,
It's
the
the
octopus would probably
goat.
medal at the Oppression Olympics for... Well, let me explain. Octopus are highly intelligent, and scientists believe they have the same cognitive ability as a 2-year-old human. Which might not seem impressive, but that means octopus are on the same IQ level as some dogs. They're even smart enough to use tools, whether it's using the tentacles of the venomous man of war as a weapon, which they actually do,
Yeah, that's
or carrying a
insane.
coconut around to keep as a travel-sized
Learned about
panic
that.
room.
Bro, what?
But being smart is the
Oh my
only thing they have
God.
going for them. First of all, most octopus come into the world as orphans. The mother octopus will spend months guarding and washing her nursery of up to 50,000 eggs. Since it's too dangerous to leave them alone, since there's no
50K?
daycare underwater,
Oh
she
my
often
god, look at all those eggs. I didn't see those.
won't eat the entire time. Which means once the clutch of eggs are finally ready to hatch, the mother is shriveling, starving, and ready to become initials on a Twitter bio. Struggle doesn't end there. In fact, that's when it starts. These babies the size of a grain of rice have to figure out life in an ocean full of animals that'll actually try to put an end to it. It's so bad that out of the 50,000 children, if more than 2 survive to adulthood, it's considered overachieving. That honestly wouldn't be a
Holy
big deal if
shit,
nature didn't
2?
already nerf them with their lifespan. It's so ridiculously short that a majority of octopus species that live life to the fullest still won't be alive for their first birthday. Being an octopus means you can be born on New Year's, have a midlife crisis by June, only to be a memory by October. Giving an animal high intelligence just to
bad
cut its
months
life
out.
after 1 to 2 years just seems like an intentional
I
dick
didn't
move.
see him.
And because they have no shell or no
Fuck yeah,
armor,
it's
they'd
my
honestly be
favorite part.
lucky to live that long. Having no real way to defend themselves means a good number of them end up a sea lion's chew toy or a dolphin's frisbee. To be fair, octopus do have camouflage, in some cases highly toxic venom, but for the most part they get bodied by most of the ocean. And to add insult to injury, every octopus you see is probably a virgin because once they get laid, they die. You already saw what happens
well,
to the
you
mother,
already
but where
learned
did
about
daddy
that
at?
too.
Once the male
Dad's
octopus
dead.
mates, he basically just gives up on life.
Yep.
The male octopus that's catched in his V-card will swim around catatonically until he either gets torn apart by predators or dies of starvation as his body falls apart due to senescence. Not like it really matters because most female octopus are bigger than the males and sometimes they'll attack and cannibalize him during. But one thing's for sure, if his date doesn't put him out of commission, his post-nut clarity
Jesus.
will. Octopus don't live long, but for the months they're alive, their entire existence is a jihad. Now
First
you know why
little at
Squidward
6
couldn't give
months?
a if a
Goddamn.
paid him. But at least with the octopus, it just
That's
seems to
crazy,
be really
only
bad
6
luck.
months?
They may be a victim of circumstance, but at least you get the idea that nature didn't go out of its way to screw them. Not like with this bird. Kiwi bird is probably the best proof that evolution ain't perfect. This tiny bird is actually part of the rat-type family. And this cookout includes ostriches, emus, cassowaries, and the rhea. But unlike its bigger cousins, this bird that shares its name with a fruit is about 18 inches tall and no more than 7 pounds. It's kinda like having
So he
cousins
just
6'3", 6'4", and
fucking
6'6",
eaten all
yet
day.
you came out looking like Tory Lanez. Like your family's tall enough to fit in an NBA locker room, yet you get it from a chair and stay the same height. But of course nature wasn't done screwing with this bird because like its relatives, they can't fly. Totally flightless, and despite being related to ostriches, a Jurassic reject, and a
just
bird that literally
wanders
won a war
around
against
on the
Australia,
fucking ground.
Kiwi's about as defenseless as the fruit that got named after it. Basically, you're looking at a bird that can't bird. The kiwi is such light work that they can only survive on islands without any mammalian predators because they're really a couple stray cats away from being put in the
Oh,
history
you're fucked.
books. And somehow, that's not it. Because nature shrunk everything about this bird. Everything except the eggs they have to push out of their body. Despite being about 60 times smaller, kiwis have to deal with eggs nearly the same size as an ostrich's. And at
Why?
20% of its body weight, that would be like the average woman birthing a 35-pound baby, with the same equipment. It's such a hell to live that the egg actually rearranges the bird's organs and stretches its rib cage. There's too many things wrong with them for me not to think nature had serious beef with this bird.
Bro, that's
especially when you realize the
fucked up.
kiwi's closest ancestor was the elephant bird, which was about 10 feet, 1,600 pounds. So yeah, they got nerfed bad. At least they didn't get hit as hard as, say,
Why just brush to clean?
Who's next? Who's gonna be next?
the sloth. For being completely honest here, the sloth has
yeah.
almost nothing going for it. Because they insisted on eating nothing but leaves, their diet makes them one of the slowest animals on the planet. Because they physically can't afford to spend energy they don't have, because going into debt would mean death. It's to the point where baby sloths have to quite literally hold on for dear life, because if it falls to the jungle floor, the mother likely
mom
won't
won't
waste
get
the
it,
energy
yeah.
trying to get it back.
Yep.
And that's because if you're a sloth, leaving this tree is the most dangerous thing you'll ever do. Sloths only poop about once a week, and when they do, they'll climb out of the tree and get on the ground to do it. Why they don't just drop a deuce from the trees, I couldn't tell you. Nobody knows what goes on in their
Yeah,
heads.
that is
But this
weird,
means about
bro.
half of all
What?
sloth deaths involve getting clapped on the toilet like Elvis.
Bro,
One thing
that
sloths
thing
have
is
going
so
for them is that they're
freaky.
so mind-numbingly slow that algae actually grows on them, giving them free camouflage. There's a catch. There is always a catch. When one of your biggest ops is an eagle with quite literally some
yeah,
of
he's
the best
gonna get
eyes in the
taken.
world, wearing a moss blanket isn't
I've
going to
seen
amount
this.
to too much. And you know evolution is actively working with
that's
them, because
fucked.
sloths are actually really good swimmers and can hold their breath for 40 minutes, longer than dolphins and seals. But it
40
means almost
minutes?
nothing when most of the time they go swimming is by accident when they fall out of a tree. And that weak-ass doggy paddle might save them from drowning, but it won't save them from getting murked by an anaconda or a black caiman. But the really sad part is, sloths could actually be way better than this.
If they
Its
just
close
ate better
relatives, the
grass,
armadillo
right?
and anteater, are able to put
But
the
they
same
just had
claws
to
that it
eat
has to
different
good
fucking
use,
shit.
and anteaters have even been known to swing on jaguars.
'Cause that-
You have
the
a
leaves
homicidal
that they
vacuum
eat
cleaner that
make
has
them
put
slow and
jaguars
shit.
and people in coffins.
Bro,
And then you have a
what?
moss blanket with a face. Just like the kiwi, the sloth used to be better than this. Megatherium, aka the giant ground sloth, was in the same weight class as elephants, and they actually knew how to use those claws. So much
my
so that if
God,
Ice Age were realistic,
Megatherium?
Sid would have worn Diego's ass like a fur coat. But its massive size ended up screwing it in the end, as they basically got hunted into oblivion by humans, leaving us now with the
Oh,
virtually
that's sad.
defenseless, dead-eyed, slower than molasses algae apartment that we call the sloth. You know that thing on TV
That's
where
sad,
it's like
man.
someone gets a genie that grants wishes, but only does so in a way that horribly bends them over in the end, and the moral's supposed to be careful what you wish for? That basically sums up this next animal, because it looks like it got finessed by a genie in one of the most disrespectful ways possible. This is a fiddler crab. Male fiddlers have one giant brolic claw whose only purpose is to get a female's attention.
Bro,
Bee crabs choose their
what?
mate based on who has the biggest claw and therefore can pass the best genes to her clutch of eggs. The problem is, that is literally the only thing this claw is good for. Because that claw is too big to pick up food, the male fiddler crab can only feed himself with that smaller claw. That massive claw is actually a disability that means the males either eat half the food or take twice as long as the females.
Bro,
the only
what?
problem with that is that these crabs only eat during low tide, and the longer the crab spends eating, the more likely they are to end up as someone else's main dish. In the evolutionary arms race for female validation, the male fiddler crab is more likely to end up getting eaten by gulls, raccoons, reptiles, and sometimes even bigger crabs.
God
Since the
damn.
females enable this by being
That is
attracted to the bigger
unfortunate,
but
man.
less functional claws, the fiddler is now trapped in a vicious cycle. By preferring males with a trait that quite literally gets them put on a shirt, the females indirectly screw the next generation. Gotta be careful what you wish for, especially if you're this next animal. Because the peacock has the same problem on steroids. We can all
peacock,
agree that the
okay.
peacock is the biggest flexor in the animal kingdom, and rightfully so.
Look at
and just
that.
like with the crab and basically every other aspect of life, bigger is most certainly better. The more colorful and eye-catching, the better the peacock's chances at bagging a peahen. They'll even shimmy their tail feathers in a way that hypnotizes any female watching. But
Bro,
like I
that
said,
is
never make a
insane.
deal with a genie. Because the good news is a peacock showing off will always be the center of attention. Bad news is sometimes that attention comes from a 700-pound assault weapon with stripes. And because those tail feathers are so heavy, not only
you're
can't
fucked.
the peacock see behind itself, even if it does see death coming, it takes them longer to get off the ground and out of the tiger's reach. Just
one
like
got
with the
away.
crab, the peacock's biggest
That one
flex
got
is
away.
often what gets it buried. In a cruel twist from fate, the peacocks that are safer from tigers are usually the ones that get less attention from females. So by having a preference, the peahens doom their future children to a fate of ultimately ending up as a tiger's toothpick.
Sheesh,
The
yo,
peacock
this
and fiddler
person's
both got
fucking
handed
recording
massive
that
L's from
too.
nature, but at
There's
least you can
someone
see the
recording
thought
that
process
shit.
behind it. Having huge claws and fancy feathers attracts females, so technically it does serve a purpose. In comparison, the Luna moth got shafted for no reason at all.
The
To make a
Luna
long
moth?
story short, adult Luna moths don't have a mouth and therefore can't eat. The only thing keeping them alive is the energy they stored as caterpillars, but once that runs out, so does their time. Luna moths live for about a week, just long enough to
Bro,
reproduce and doom their
what?
children to the same fate of a non-consensual
They don't
hunger
have a
strike.
mouth.
If you ask
dog.
Google why the Luna moth doesn't have a mouth, it'll tell you because its only purpose is to mate. Which is really nature not giving a fraction of a about them. Yeah, that's cruel. Question is,
Bro,
what
that's
could possibly be
fucked up.
crueler? Well, if you know what this is, you probably have the answer.
What is
This
this?
is a sea louse. It's a member of the Caligidae family of copepods, which is basically just a bunch of small crustaceans. You probably noticed that for the peacocks and the crabs, it was the guys getting the worst of it. Apparently, nature believes in a weird form of equality because right now it's up for the girls. The horror show starts when a male sea louse kidnaps a much smaller female and then forcibly drags her into what I can only describe as a crustacean sex dungeon, where he can have up to 20 other victims also trapped. It's at this moment where this
Bro,
movie
what
loses its
the
rating because the
fuck?
male will forcibly impregnate every last female in his burrow, and this often involves penetrating her abdomen. Don't worry, it gets worse. As her brood of children that she never asked for begin to grow, they decide to start eating their way out. Eventually, the mother's body splits open as her nursery of psychopaths rush out of her now mutilated husk of a corpse. This might be one of the only times where the babies abort the mother. She doesn't even really get to give birth. Her children just bring her death. You might be wondering why evolution would even give this nonsense the green light. Well, the newborn sea louse are entering an ocean full of danger, and having a full meal before they make it out on their own apparently increases their chance of survival. And by cannibalizing their own mother, it's basically a home-cooked meal. Somehow, this isn't even the worst birth on this list. That title belongs to the hyena because straight-up death is actually better than what they go through. Female hyenas evolved a pseudo-penis that's so similar to the real thing, it's actually difficult to tell males and females apart. This is actually a female. Only problem is, it's not just for show, they actually have to give birth to that thing. And yes, it's every bit as painful as you think. And just
I don't want to see this. That is fucked. What? Holy shit, bro. Oh, hell no. Hey, I mean, hyenas do literally eat their victims, like, while they're still alive, so let's be real, it's just, I don't want to say deserved, but motherfucker.
Comment when it comes to doing hyenas dirty.
Oh my, yeah,
But if we're talking about an animal that got done
sheesh.
dirty, this picture kind of speaks for itself. Matter of fact, this is probably going to be the thumbnail because this is nature at its grimiest. A lot of y'all probably knew this animal is coming just from reading the title, but for those of you that didn't, that was the skull of the babarusa. It's a wild pig found in Indonesian islands like Sulawesi.
Isn't there a goat that does that too? Like, there's a goat where
knew that. It's probably because of those teeth. Those tusks penetrate out of its snout only to do a complete 180 and head right back towards its face. If the male babarusa can't wear down this hellish overbite or he doesn't lose them in a fight, then the teeth will end up growing right back into his head, penetrating the skull and ultimately piercing the brain. But the worst part of it all is that by the time it gets clapped by its own dental plan, the babarusa's probably already had children and therefore passed on its bullshit to its kids. It's a lot like Parkinson's. Okay, hear me out. The problem with Parkinson's is that it usually develops late in life, usually around the age of 60. And patients can have it for years without being diagnosed. So by the time they do find out, it's possible they could have already had kids and grandkids that they could have passed it off to. See the problem, right? The only good thing is that it's somewhat rare for a child to inherit Parkinson's from their parents. The babarusa, not so lucky. And as long as females find big tusks attractive, and as long as the tusks only murk them after they've had babies, this pig is going to be screwed eternally and evolution can't even stop it. But when you talk about being sodomized by the fleshy phallus of nature, you're probably talking about cheetahs.
That is fucked, man.
If you watch Tier Zoo, if you're watching this, you probably do. You probably heard him say that cheetahs are F-tier garbage that either need to be buffed or just vaulted out of their misery. I love cheetahs, I really do, but out of every animal on this list, evolution might have bodied the cheetah the hardest, and for one simple reason. Cheetahs are really fast.
And that's it.
That is all they have.
Yep.
Cheetahs are a textbook example of why you should never dump all your evolution.
And they can only run for like
points in one skill, because you'll just get bent over in every other aspect of life. Because they're built for speed and absolutely nothing else, cheetahs often get bullied by other predators, especially lions and hyenas. And because cheetahs have to expend so much energy just to make a kill, it forces them to rest right after, which makes it really easy for other animals to just step in and run their pockets. But for real, if you're a cat and a bird that literally only eats the dead is able to run you off, you got a lot of problems. Worst part is, cheetahs could easily avoid all of this. Leopards are also lightweight solitary hunters that occasionally get their food stolen, but they're able to carry their kills up in trees where they can't get harassed by scavengers.
That's why leopards are so badass, bro. That's my favorite big cat. Leopards and tigers, bro.
Race for speed, cheetahs evolved non-retractable claws to use as cleats to keep traction while running. Which is why cheetahs can't climb trees, so they gotta get violated on the ground. Cheetahs are such pushovers that one hyena can successfully rob several cheetahs right in their face and then dare them to do something about it. Cheetahs compromised everything for speed, so now they get to speed run through life. About 70% of cheetah cubs born in the wild will be 6 feet under before their first birthday. And just to add on to that, because why the hell not, thanks to genetic bottleneck, a majority of the cheetah population is highly inbred. What you're looking at is a cat that doesn't really know how to cat. Because instead of roaring like lions, tigers, and leopards, the best this spotted doormat can do is chirp like a bird. Matter of fact, if you YouTube it real quick, you'll find they make every sound that isn't a roar.
What?
And that's how you know evolution went out of its way to them. Cheetahs have been around for about 3 million years and decided they were just gonna IM speed their way through life. And because of that, unless it's a 100-meter dash or a bird call contest, this overgrown house cat loses every single time. Obviously, there's a lot of good things about the cheetah, but not nearly enough to justify the abuse they go through. Which is probably why a majority of cheetahs in captivity experience severe anxiety so bad that it prevents them from mating and they need an emotional support dog. Which is cute, don't get me wrong, but it's another reason why cheetahs are dangerously close to being the pandas of cats, and that's not something anyone wants to be. And don't get it twisted, I don't enjoy roasting cheetahs, I actually really love them, but if nature has favorites, this Cheetos mascot isn't one of them. And those are 10 animals that got the middle finger from evolution. I'm not gonna lie to you, this video was low-key a pain to make. So if you liked the video and you'd like to support this,
I bet. Yo, shout out fucking Hood Nature. It's not Hood Nature anymore though. It's Casual Geographic. He changed his name like a fucking month ago or something like that. But shout out Casual Geographic, man.